Rabbi says, so first of all, the context of this week's Parshas Pinchas is as though, in the end of Parshas Chukas, it says, Vayisu b'nei Yisrael, vayachanu ba'arvois moyov me'ever l'yarden yireichai. So this was the last stop in the Mem Beis Masois, the 42 Masois that Klal Yisrael journeyed in the Midbar. As it says in Parshas Masei, Vayisu mehore ha'avorim, vayachanu ba'arvois moyov al yarden yireichai, vayachanu al hayarden mi beis ha'yeshimois ad ovel hashitim, which Rashi says means the plains of Shitim, ba'arvois moyov. And when they were there, the story with Bilam and Bolok took place. And then, as it says in the end of Parshas Bolok, what happened with the B'noi Smoyov, that was Vayachanu Yisrael Bashitim. And that's where Zimri ben Solu, Nasi Shevet Shimon, did what he did. And Pinchas ben Elazar killed him and the Midyanis. And our Parshas Pinchas, begins with the reward that Pinchas received for what he did. And then comes the tzivui to count Klal Yisrael, which is really a preparation to entering Eretz Yisrael, because the Chalukas Haaretz was in a way of Lorav, Tarbe Nachlosai, L'ma'at Tamet Nachlosai. So there was a count in preparation for that Chalukah. And immediately after that comes the Dinu Dvarim with the B'nai Slavchad about their chelik in Eretz Yisrael. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, Alei el har ha'avorim haseh, u're'ei es ha'oretz asher nasati l'vnei Yisrael, v'ra'isa oisa v'ne'esafto el hamecha gam ato, kasher nesaf Aaron achicha. So Moshe Rabbeinu is not entering Eretz Yisrael. He's going to die in the Midbar. And immediately after that, it says, "Vayidaber Moshe el Hashem leimor yifkoid Hashem elokei aruchos l'chol basar ish al ha'eda." He's asking the Rebbeinu Shalom to appoint a new leader, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him to be soimech Yehoshua. So it's all organized perfectly in the right order, as Klal Yisrael is preparing to enter Eretz Yisrael. But immediately after the yifkoid Hashem elokei aruchos l'chol basar ish al ha'eda, it says, "Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe leimor Saves b'nei Yisrael v'amarta aleim es karboni lachmi li'ishai reach tishmeru lahakriv li b'mayadoi." So this is the tzivui for the korban ha-tamid. After that come the musafei Shabbos, the musafei Rosh Chodesh, the musafim of the Moyadim, until the end of the parsha. Actually, Parshas Matos, that talks about the halachas of Nedarim, the Rishonim say comes behemshich to the musafin of the Yomim Tovim, which appear in Parshas Pinchas, because the Torah signs off in Parshas Pinchas, Eile tasu la'Hashem b'moyadechem levad mi nidreichem v'nidvoiseichem, and therefore Parshas Matos begins with an Nedarim. Now the question is, the mitzvah of korbanos l'chora belongs in Chumash Vayikra, which is the Sefer Torah's Kohanim. The korban hatamid and the other korbanos l'chora are not connected with the entry into Eretz Yisrael. They l'chora were korev since the Hakamas HaMishkan, in the beginning of the second year, let's say, it's B'nai Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. So how did it come into Parshas Pinchas when we're preparing to go into Eretz Yisrael? Truth is that already in Parshas Tetzaveh, right after the tzivui for on the korbanos hamiluim, that they will be makriv b'shas hakamas hamishkin, it says v'zeh asher taseh al hamizbeach kvasim b'nei shana shnayim layoim tamid es hakevas echad taseh b'boyker es hakevas asheri taseh b'nei haboyim, etc. So we b'chal don't understand, why is it repeated again? Why is the Tamid repeated once again in Parshas Pinchas? So Rashi, in our Parsha, in the Dibur HaMaschil Es HaKeves Echad, says, Afal pi shekvar nemar beParshas Va'ato Tetzaveh v'zeh asher taseh hi hoisa azhara liyemei hamiluim v'kan tziva ledoros. So it seems from Rashi that since the Yemei HaMiluim, during the 39 years since Hakamas HaMishkan, they did not bring a korban tamid, because the original tzivui in Parshas Tetzaveh was only for the Yemei HaMiluim. It was part of the inauguration of the Mishkan, but afterwards there was no korban tamid. And so it also seems from Rashi in the Dibur HaMaskil, Oilas Tamid Ha'asuya Bahar Sinai. Rashi says, Ka'oison shenasu b'yemei hamiluim. So if we're talking now about doing the korban tamid, and it should be Oilas Tamid Ha'asuya al Har Sinai, if we're referencing the Oilas Tamid that was done in the Yemei HaMiluim, it seems that since the Yemei HaMiluim, since the Hakamas HaMishkan, which when they brought the korban tamid at Har Sinai, because they were still camping at Har Sinai, they didn't bring a korban tamid. I mean, this is l'chora shver, because in Parshas Tetzaveh it says Oilas tamid ledoiroi sechem. So how can we say that v'zeh asher taseh was only talking about the Yemei HaMiluim? But it's interesting that the Ibn Ezra on the pasuk Oilas Tamid L'Doiroi Seichem in Parshas Tetzaveh, the Ibn Ezra says L'Doiroi Seichem Yasu Kocho Bevoyom El Eretz Canaan. That L'Doiroi Seichem doesn't mean from now on. L'Doiroi Seichem means that your future generations will bring the korban tamid. Yasu Kocho Bevoyom El Eretz Canaan Ki Lo Hikrivu Oilos Rak Chamishim Yoim B'Midbar Sinai. As long as they were in Midbar Sinai, after the Hakamas HaMishkan, the Ibn Ezra says they were still bringing the korban tamid. V'zehu Oilas Tamid Ha'asuya B'Har Sinai. And he goes on, and then he says, Val derech hasvore, lo hikrivu Yisrael oilos uzvachim rak b'Sinai levadoi. It's not only the korban tamid, they didn't bring any oilos uzvachim after they left Sinai during the Masois in the Midbar. Ki Yisrael omdu b'soyhu yelel yeshimoin k'moi shmoina u'shloishim shona. They were traveling for 38 years in a Midbar. Ume'ayin hoya lohem b'chol yom chatzi ahin shemen zayis gam yayin ve'eich yohlichu imohem k'moi arba osor elef hin. How could they carry so much oil and wine? Ume'ayin hoya lohem shnei kvasim b'nei shana b'chol yom. Where would they get in the midbar shnei kvasim b'nei shana b'chol yom? V'toisefes b'shabes u'b'moyadim. And therefore, the Ibn Ezra says that the korban tamid wasn't carved in the midbar, and the musafim was not carved in the midbar. Lo hikrivu Yisrael oilos uzvachim during the time that they traveled in the midbar. According to this, I mean, it's obviously pashut why the tzivui of the korban tamid and the musafin of Rosh Chodesh Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh Hamoyadim appears over here as they're about to enter Eretz Yisrael. The Ramban has a different opinion about this. He holds that the Tmidim, they were makriv in the Midbar, but the Musafim, they weren't makriv. And also Nesachim, they didn't do. The Ramban writes about this in Parshas Emor, Chav Gimel Beis. He says that therefore in Parshas Emor, all the Moyadim appear, but the Torah doesn't spell out what kind of korbanos you shall bring. It just says that it's a mikra kodesh, and it says that it'll be makriv ishay la Hashem, but it doesn't say what. He says because in the midbar they didn't yet bring the korbanos, so it wasn't important to spell out what exactly the korbanos are. It's just part of the definition of the mikra kodesh is that it will be a time of ishay la Hashem. And then he says, "Va'achar shemono bo'ei haaretz." After the count of those that will enter Eretz Yisrael, which appears b'chumash hapekudim, v'tziva la'ele teicholek haaretz, Bi'er hamusafin kulon beparshas Pinchas, sheyasu oisam ba'oretz. So also in our parsha, he discusses this in Kapitel Chof Ches Pasuk Beis, and he adds that the Tamid was Korev in the Midbar. The reason that the Tamid is mentioned once again in the context of the Korbanos and Parshas Pinchas is because Hichziroi lihiyos hakol sodur beparsha achas. Really, what we're trying to teach over here is the Musafin of Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, and Moedim. But in this context, the Torah repeats the Parshas HaTamid, lihiyos hakol sodur beparsha achas. You know, Rashi in the Dibur HaMaskal, Oilas Tamid ha'asuyo, Bahar Sinai has another pshat. He says, Davar acher, ha'asuyo Bahar Sinai, makish, Oilas Tamid, lo Oilas Har Sinai. What's the Oilas Har Sinai? Oiso, shenikriva lefnei matan Torah, shekosov bo vayosem ba'agonois, melamed shetu'uno kli, that there had to be a Kabbalas Hadam bekli. So it's possible that according to this second pshat, they did bring the Tamid during the 40 years in the Midbar, not only during the Yemei HaMiluim, because we're not really referencing over here the Tamid of the Yemei HaMiluim, but we're just saying that this should be, it's Te'una Kli, like the Oila She'krivu Lifnei Matan Torah. Obviously, there was an oil after that. So that was, at least by the Yemei HaMiluim. So according to this pshat, it's not muchach that they did not have tmidim during the 40 years in the Midbar. I'll call upon him. According to the Ibn Ezra, there were no korbanos in the Midbar at all, not the korban tamid and not the musafin. According to the Ramban, they did bring tmidim, but not musafin. According to Rashi, it seems l'chora, according to one of his pshatim in Ha'asuya Bahar Sinai, that musafin they did bring in the Midbar, but tmidim they didn't bring in the Midbar. After the Yemei HaMiluim, there was no Tamid anymore. And really, there's a machlokes tanoim about this in Chagiga Avavam and Beis between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Akiva, Ayin Sham. Now, the Ibn Ezra says that no carbon was carved in the Midbar. He says that it's a svara. That they didn't have what to be makriv, because where would they schlep behemoths and in the Sachim and etc. But obviously, we need to say that there must be a principal reason, and that there were no korbanos in the Midbar. According to Rashi and the Ramban, that they did bring either tmidim or musafin, so we must say that they did have what to bring. So avada, we need to explain why in the Midbar were the tmidim not korv or the musafin not korv. I mean, what does the hakrava of the tmidim or the musafin and the musafin have to do with the entry into Eretz Yisrael? You know, we just began the Yemei Bein HaMetzarim. Parshas Pinchas is always read in the first Shabbos of the 3 weeks, or right before the first Shabbos of the 3 weeks. And according to what the Shloh says in several places, that there's a connection between Parshas HaShavua and Inyan D'Yoyma. So that connection needs to be explored and explained. In Parshas Pinchas, we have all the Moyadim. So why is it read in a time of mourning? So first of all, I mean, we were promised that Yehafchu Yomim Elu L'Sosoin U'L'Simcha, that these days will be transformed into Yomim Tovim. You know, so at Shivasa B'Tammuz will become a Yom Tov. The Arizal says that, you know, Aaron said to Klal Yisrael, Chag LaHashem Mochor, which was about the 17th day of Tammuz, and he says that that will eventually come true, La'asid Lavoi, when it will be transformed into a Chag and a Moyed, because Yehafchu Yomim Elu L'Sosin L'Simcha. So, maybe that's how we should explain the fact that we read the Parshas HaMoyadim next to Shivasa B'Tammuz. probably it also connects with the fact that this parsha talks about the Nachlas Haaretz and about the Chalukas Haaretz. And this is the time when we're Galinu Me'erzei. But it would seem that also Yeshua's being Nismach al Yidei Moshe Rabbeinu, and also the parsha of the Tmidim and the Musafim are shaykh to this time period. Because, the Mishnah says in Tainus that Chamisha Dvorim Iru La'avoseinu B'Shavasa B'Tammuz. And the Mishnah counts amongst them Butal HaTomid and Huvka'a Ha'ir. The Tomid was discontinued and they breached the walls of Yerushalayim. And it would seem that these two things are really connected. In other words, it was the Butal HaTomid that enabled the enemy to breach the walls of Yerushalayim. And that's, like we see in Bava Kama, in the end of Perek Merubah, Daf Pei Beis Amid Beis, the Gemara brings a brayse, Tanu Rabbanan kishetzoru beis chashmoino izeh al zeh. There was a civil war going on between two brothers. Hoya hurkenes mi befnim, v'arestublus mi bachutz, u'bechol yoim, hoyu mishalshim lohem bekupa dinarim. So those that were on the inside would let down a kupa of money to those that were on the outside, v'hoyu malin lohem tmidim. And they sent back tmidim in those kupos. Hoya shom zoken echot shehoya make b'chochme yevonis. Amar lohem kol zman she'oiskim ba'avoide ein atem nimsorim b'yadchem. So lemachar shilshulu dinarim b'kupa v'helu lohem chazir. Kivin shehigia lechatzi achoyme noat tziparnov b'choyma v'nizdaza eretz Yisrael tovkuf parsa al tovkuf parsa, and ba'oisa she'amru or ra'ish that will teach his children chachme yevonis, and or ra'ish that's megadol chazerim beretz Yisrael. But we see that the choyma, the standing of the choyma, was dependent on the hakravas hatmidim. I mean, when exactly the story was, in case you're curious, there's a whole thesis over there that discusses. But we see over here that the standing of the chayma depends on the hakravas hatmidim. As long as they were makriv the tamid, so the chayma it couldn't be breached. So therefore, the butal hatamid is really what brings on the huvka ha'ir. But this needs to be explained. I mean, what does the tamid have to do with the chayma, and why is the tamid so important? On the pasuk tzav es bnei Yisrael v'amarta aleim es korbani lachmi leishai tishmeru lahakriv li b'mayadoi. Says Rashi, ma omor lamayla. What did it say before? Yifkoid Hashem alekei aruchos l'chol basa ish al ha'eda. Moshe Rabbeinu was asking the Rebbeinu Shalom to appoint a successor. So, Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ad sha'ato mitzaveni al bonai, till before you tell me what to do for my children, tzavei es bonai olai, tell my children what to do for me. Moshel bas melech shehoisa nifteres min ha'olam, v'hoisa mafkedes l'bayla b'nei. She was telling her husband to look after the children, so the husband said, why are you telling me to look after the children? Tell the children to look after me. So this is what Rashi says. It comes from the Sifri. So it would seem that this is an independent reason for the fact that the korban hatomid appears over here. But l'chara, if it's true that in the midbar they didn't bring tmidim, or even musafin, or at least the musafin they didn't bring, so this whole parsha of the tamid and the musafin is shaykh right over here. It doesn't need to be explained. Maybe this Sifri Rashi is quoting, and it's following the davar acher in the Rashi that we brought before, that ha'asuya b'har Sinai means l'fnei matan Torah. According to that pshat, it could be that they did bring tmidim in the midbar, and this Sifri is following that opinion. But the truth is, there's another problem with the Sifri. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Rebbeinu Shalom, Yifkei Hashem Elokei Aruchos, Ish Aloida. HaKadosh Baruch Hu responded to that request, and he told him to be Soymech Yehoshua. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepted the Mitzaveni Al Bonai. So how are Chazal saying that the Parshas HaTomid, which appears immediately after, means Adash Shata Mitzaveni Al Bonai, Tzavei Es Bonai Olai. The Rebbeinu Shalom accepted the Tzaveni Al Bonai. So it would seem that in the Mitzaveni Al Bonai, Moshe Rabbeinu was asking for a Mamalo Mokim, for a successor that will be B'Musay B'Tzalmoi, will be in his image, that will continue Moshe Rabbeinu's style of leadership. Leadership of Pnei Moshe ke Pnei Chamo, that lights up the day completely. In the Midbar, Klal Yisrael received lechem and hashamayim, water from the Be'er. They were carried on Anani HaKavod and surrounded by Anani HaKavod. So Moshe Rabbeinu's request that Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu should appoint a Mamala Mokim was really Mitzaveni Al Bonai, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should continue to be present in the life of the Jewish people during the era of the coming leader, just like he was until now in the Midbar. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling him that from here on begins a new tkufa, a tkufa of Tzavei Es Bonai Olai. The Dor Boy Haaretz are meant to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom with self-effort. They're no longer going to be carried al kanfei neshorim. From here on, they have to be v'asafta v'ganecha v'siroshecha v'yitzarecha, and they have to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's the Tzavei Es Bonai Olai. That's the leadership of Pnei Yehoshua ke Pnei Levana. That at night there's no Or Hachama. Klal Yisrael will no longer be Samuch al Shulchanoi Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In the Midbar, there was no Tamid. Meaning to say, in the Midbar, there were constant miracles. Al Pi Hashem Yachanu, Al Pi Hashem Yiso. There was no routine. We never knew where we will be tomorrow. The tomorrow and the today and the yesterday were not connected, B'chlal. So there was no routine. But from here on, we're actually starting a very regular, routine life. A life of Asafta, the Gonecha, V'Siroshcha, V'Yitzarecha, and we're being called on to connect with the Rebbeinu Shalom, even in the Talmud. That's the meaning of the Korban HaTamid, which is to be that we should, with our effort, be miskarev, Korban is Miloshin Kiruv, on our own, in a state of Tamid. So that the appointment of Yehoshua and the Parshas HaTamid are both part of the Tzavei Es Bonai Olai, instead of the Mitzaveni Al Bonai. The Rebbeinu Shalom is saying, from here on, I'm not working for them in the same way that I was working for them until now. Don't think that we're continuing with the Mitzaveni Al Bonai. From here on, it's Tzavei Le Bonai Alai, and therefore Yehoshua, that Pnei Yehoshua ke Pnei Levana, he's going to take over, and he's not going to lead Klal Yisrael the same way that you, Moshe Rabbeinu, led them, and therefore tell them about the Korban HaTamid. Really, I mean, this idea I later found it appears more or less in the Svasemis in Parshas Pinchas in Tov Reish Lamed Tes. He says, "B'posik Tzaves Bnei Yisrael b'Rashi u'Medrash Atzim Atam Tzaveni Al Bonai Tzavei Bonai Alai Ha'inyan. The Yesh Lechem Min Hashamayim u'Min Haaretz." Yeah, there's bread that comes from heaven, and there's bread that comes that grows on the ground. V'hi b'chinas Torah shebichsav v'shebal peh. U'Moshe Rabbeinu olav Shalom hoirid haTorah min hashamayim la'aretz. He brought the Torah down from heaven to earth. V'hamon diksiv hineni mamti lochem lechem min hashamayim. That's also from, it comes from above. V'rotza Moshe Rabbeinu olav hashalom lahashir zois achrov. He expected that this should continue. Aval be'emes hischil ato b'chines lechem min ha'oretz. Hainu hiskarvus mitzad hatachtoinim lashomayim. Yeah, the hiskarvus that comes as a result of self-effort. Hainu tzavei es bonai olai. V'hi b'chines hakorbanos v'chein tefillah sheb'mokem tzmidim iskin. V'hi sheb'leiv. Yeah. And then, this is what he says in Tafresh Lametes. And then in Tafresh Mem, he says, a fascinating thing. He says, Smichis Parshiyos Halolu, Kohunas Pinchas, V'tzoreres HaMidyonim, V'haminyan, Uptiras Moshe Rabbeinu Olav HaSholem. What's the connection of all these things? He says, Ha'inyan hu ki ato hischil liyos hanhoga acheres, shel dor boy ha'oretz. This is a new hanhoga. Lochein hoya minyan chodesh. Therefore, they were counted anew, because it's a new era. Ukemoi b'dor ha'midbar niten lahem Aaron hakoyen, kach b'dor ze hoya kohunas Pinchas. In other words, Aaron hakoyen, he became a kohen without any self-efforts. He was appointed by the Rabban Shalom. But Pinchas, his kohuna, is achieved through Pinchas's Maisa. And this is already the beginning of the new anhoge of the Dor Bo Yoretz. Rak mikoidim, hoya b'mayla el yoyne l'mayla mi'ateva b'koicha shel Moshe Rabbeinu, v'lachein kohuna saharan hoysem atonim min hashamayim. U'Pinchas b'din zocha l'kohunasoi. Ki hoya lefi hishtanus hador, shehischil ato liyos avoidas ha'odom, v'hisoirus shelamata, b'pchines Torah shebal peh. V'zeh atzmoi inyan shel kanoim poigim boy. Shehu einoi bar moves b'Sanhedrin. Shal pi adin, ein yecholim la'amisoi. V'rak mi shemekana l'Hashem nishtana adin l'horgo shekein din HaTorah. Nimtza shebnei Yisrael b'ma'aseyem, mishanim b'ma'aseyem kol anhogas HaTorah. This shows the impact that we have on the Torah. V'zeh inyan Torah shebal peh. Sha'kol nitten misinai, rak shebnei Yisrael tzrichim lo yitzir mikoich al hapoel. Umashe Moshe Rabbeinu olav hasholem lo yihorag Zimri, rak Pinchas lo yoya pchisus leMoshe Rabbeinu olav hasholem, rak shebo Pinchas v'notal hashaloi, ube'emes doire shel Moshe Rabbeinu al yidei shehoyu gvoya ma'oid lo yhoya ha'anhoga b'koyach ha'anoshim, rak b'anhoga el yoyna. Shebotol seichel v'koyach hasogas ha'odem b'madrega romazu. V'achar kach shenishpelu hadoros nikir v'nitzrich oirus hatachtonim kanal. So this is Ayin Shom. In any case, this is the idea. I'm saying that the korbanot tamid comes at this point because in a life of habit and routine, it's challenging to preserve vitality. Yes, so we were also given musafin, which are the korbanos that are specific korbanos for specific zmanim in order that we shouldn't reach a point of stagnation. So the special zmanim, the Rosh Chodesh, the Shabbos, the Moyadim, help us have a sense of renewal. But the goal is that even on the regular simple days, we should connect with the Rebbeinu Shalom as it comes. It's expressed in the steady, ongoing avodah of keves echot taseh b'boiker and keves hasheni taseh ben ha'arbayim. As I mentioned before, that in the Hagdam of the Ein Yankov, he brings a medrash that is a machlokes tanoim. What's the klal godel b'Torah? Is it Shema Yisrael? Is it v'ahavta l'reacha kamoicha? Or other things? And then it says Reb Shimon ben Pazi Omer that the klal godel is a sakeves echot taseh b'boiker and sakeves hasheni taseh ben ha'arbayim. In other words, the klal godel is consistency and connecting with the Rebbeinu Shalom in the mundane daily routine. So the Gemara in Zvachim actually says in the sugi of Todir U'Makudish, the Gemara says, Otu chodesh l'musafi didei ahani l'tmidi lo yahani, which means that on Rosh Chodesh, the Tamid becomes upgraded. In other words, the tachlis of the islands of renewal, of the Moyadim, of the Rosh Chadoshim, of the Shabbos, is to make every day special. In other words, as Rashi says on the pasuk, Tishmeru lahakriv li b'moyadoi, kol yoim hu moyed hatamid. So every day is a Yom Tov. A Jew is supposed to live that way. And that's the real meaning of Oilas Tamid Ha'asuyo Bahar Sinai, that even though it's done day in, day out, every day, all the time, it's ongoing, it's steady, but nevertheless, it should be done like the Oilas Tamid Ha'asuyo Bahar Sinai, the first carbon tamid that was ever brought, because every day is a first. It should be lived as a first day. So since the entry into Eretz Yisrael is for the purpose of self-effort in a world of routine, as opposed to the Midbar, so the Tamid is critical to our life in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore when it's Butal HaTamid, it's Hufka Ha'ir. As it says in Parshas V'eschanan, that the Golus comes as a result of V'noishantem Ba'oretz. V'noishantem is, you become old. The Nishant, Yoshon is old, Yoshen is sleepy. It's all part of the same thing. It's the lack of vitality, the lack of renewal. And that's V'nishantem Ba'oretz, that brings the Golus. So that's the Butal HaTamid. The Butal HaTamid is the exterior expression of the interior Butal HaTamid, that we don't have the ability to live a life of Tishmeru, Lahakriv Li B'moy Adoi, Kol Yoim V'Yoim Hu Moyed HaTamid. But every Einish is really a opening for Tikkun. Just like in the Midbar, we didn't have a need for a carbon tamid because we never knew what the tomorrow will bring. Yeah, Al Pi Hashem Yachanu, Al Pi Hashem Yiso. So also in Golus that the Navi calls Midbar Ha'amim, we don't know Ma Yulad Yoim. We have no Kvius, we have no stability, not in Gashmias, not in Ruchnias. So we're behechreach, always in a state of need to renew ourselves. Yeah, in this context, I just want to share with you, Bekitzer, the Meshech Chochmah. That, people see in this Meshech Chochmah, prophecy, but the truth is that this Meshech Chochmah is a deep sociological analysis and theological insight. The Meshech Chochmah in Parshas Bechukoisai, he discusses. I can't tell you the whole thing; you have to see it yourself. But he says, "V'hine me'eis hayois Yisrael bagoyim, b'rvois hashonim." Right? Asher lo yaminu kol yoshvei seivel ki yiskaimu ba'ofen nifla. Asher lo yishar machshavas adam maskil. How Jewish survival and continuity is impossible to grasp. Hayoidei hakoros hayomim v'hametzoylos asher shotfu ba'alfei shonim al am hama'at v'harofe v'harafei koyach v'chadal oinim. So he says, "Hine derech hashgocha ki yanuchu meshech shonim korov l'mea oimasayim." The derech hashgocha is that Jews settle in a land for 100 or 200 years. Va'achar zeh yokum ruach se'ora. Then comes a storm, a very strong wind. V'yofoitz hamoim galov v'kola yivle yarois yashtoif lo yachmoil ad ki nivzorim bedudim. Yeah, the Jews have to disperse. They have to escape. They yarutzu yivrechu l'makam rachuk v'sham yisachnu yiu l'goy, and over there they come back together. Yugdal toirosam chochmasam yasu chayil ad ki yishkach hayoisoi ger beretz nachriel, until they forget that they're strangers in a foreign country. Yachshoiv ki zeh mekoym achtzavtoi, they think that this is where they belong. Bal yitzapel Yeshuas Hashem haruchonis bezman hamayud sham. So when they're finally settled in, 100, 200 years, comes a stronger storm. Yazkir oise b'kol soyen barash. Yehudi ata, umi sam chalesh. You're a Jew. Who do you think you are? Leichal eretz hashelo yadata. Get out of here. Go to somewhere else. Kocho yachlif matziv ha'Yisraeli v'kiyumoi ba'amim. Kasha ein ha'maskil yireh b'sefer divrei hayom. V'zel shtei sibois. L'kiyum hadas ha'amiti v'taharosoi u'l'kiyum ha'uma. And now he says like this. Ki kasha yonuach Yisrael ba'amim. When we become comfortable. Yafriach v'yigdal terosoi u'pulpuloi. Our Torah is Yafriach v'yigdal. Ubonov yasu choyu. Yizgadru neged aveiseim. So at this point, we become, we start rebelling against our parents. Ki kocha chofetz ha'ish. That's human nature. Asher ha'achroin yechadesh, Yosef oimetz, masher yonela me'adar ha'yoshen. Every new generation wants change, wants innovation, wants to do what the previous generation didn't do. V'zeh b'chochmois ha'anushis, asher mekoiron machzeves seichel ha'anushi. And it is so. V'hanisoyen b'zeh, yizgadru ha'achroinim yosifu oimetz. That it really in Chochmah Anushis, it is that way, that every generation really undoes many things that the previous generation thought were correct, and finds new things. But loikein hadas ha'eloiki hanitten men hashamayim umekoirei loyal eretz chutzov haloyim hoya be eretz Yisrael milafonim haloy hoya lahem liizgad der betikun uma kolecha lefidor bezna god loya yochel levatel as divri bezna koidim umashin nidrish biyud gimel midas av bezn kot noya yochel leharis oifen hayoshe beinayim. So now he goes into a whole thing that during the time of the Beis Hamikdash there was a way to express innovation. There's a way to express change, because the Bezin HaGodel, a Bezin Godel was able to, Bezin Godel Yochel Avatel Divri Bezin HaKoidim. And Mashin Nidrish Biyud Gimel Midas, Av Bezin Kotten, Hoya Yochel Laharis, Oifen HaYoshe Beinayim. Ure'ei B'yom HaKippurim L'in Shiurim Asher Amru, Shebedin Nefoshes Ukol Echad K'fi Heskem Chachmei Doiroi. And then he says, but the problem is, he says that, and that there was Indian of Hayra Shah, Al Pinavur, but Loi came Bagoyla, Shenesmait HaKibbutz V'Asifa B'Limud HaTorah, Shemitam Ze Ein Reshus L'Shum Bezin L'Chadish Dover. So today, a Bezin cannot undo what was until now. K'moy Shekosov HaRambam Agdam Mosi L'Sefer Mishnah Torah. The Ein Shum Choyze V'Novi, there's no Choyze V'Novi that can give a Hayra Shah. So Mamela, he says, how are we going to have a sense of renewal? How are we going to outdo our parents? So he says, that when we come into a new country, we're Einam B'nai Torah, we're Amaratzim, because we're down at the bottom of the barrel, because we just escaped, and it's a generation that's cut off from the past. Then they have an awakening. Yilmadu, Yarbitzu Torah, Yasin Leflois. Ad ki yamoid keren Torah al rumay v'siyoi, until Torah reaches new heights. Haloi ein biyad hador lehoisif ma lehizgader neged avoisam. Ma yase chayfetz ha'odem ha'osi lehizgader v'lechadish. But now that Torah is at its height, but people have a need. The next generation has a need for change. So what happens is Yevaker b'rayon koizev, they criticize with wrong ideas es asher hanchilu aveiseinu yishar chadoshes. Anyway, see, he says that the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes sure that our need for change doesn't undo Torah in Golus is by uprooting us from one Golus to another Golus. So we go all the way down, and then we come all the way up. So we come all the way up, we come to the same place, but we come there with a sense of renewal. And Mamela, this is the way renewal is preserved in Golus. So what I'm saying is, in the Midbar, it was Al Pi Hashem Yisrael, Al Pi Hashem Yachnu. In Eretz Yisrael, we have the ability to live a life of tamid with a sense of renewal, tmidin and musafin and tmidin. And the although hashlim kol hakorbanos kulam in the midbar ha'amim, he's saying that it's the challenges that bring out our renewal and don't allow us to become stagnated, because we constantly are challenged and we're kicked around from here to there and from there to here, and Mamela, that brings out our koyach of ischachos. Anyway, listen, there is the helfen that we should have Yehofchu Yomim Elu L'Sasain U'Lesimcha. And okay, and you should have a good Shabbos.